This is the Cube Stereo Hybrid 120 Pro Allroad 625. It's got the 625 watt-hour Bosch PowerTube built right into that down tube, so really good weight positioning, as well as the motor over here. It's got the Bosch Performance Line CX mountain biking motor, and this is the stereo model. So stereo, like stereo speakers too, well, that's in reference to front and rear suspension here, rock shocks for both. And I think the 120 might be pointing out 120 millimeters of travel back here, but I think the website says 130 up front for this RockShox Recon. Pretty decent. This is an air fork, a little bit lighter, more adjustable. You can sag it. Black anodized stanchions. They look really nice. And then we've got this compression adjust. It's kind of a clicker, so it's progressive and you can almost lock it out. Down here we have rebound adjust. Now this is boost hub spacing, and it does have a 15 millimeter through axle, so you get a sturdier bracing angle and just overall strength and stiffness. I love that Cube, you know, they've got the black spokes, black rims, and they use eyelets, reinforcement eyelets. So if you're truing this or just tightening them, it's less likely to crack or cause damage. This is a nicer part overall. So good job there. Smart SAM with K-Guard. These are active lines, so they have puncture protection, 29 by 2.6, which is really neat, really interesting to see this. Normally with 29ers, I'm not seeing plus size tires, and 2.6, 2.8, and 3.0, that's plus size. So a little bit more volume, more float, more stability, and probably helps you just to overcome rocks and stuff. And we have a really low attack angle on these. They're going to be very efficient once they're up to speed. It does elevate the platform a little bit, but pretty special. That whole all-road concept really appeals to me. You know, we've got these plastic fenders, but we've got knobby mountain biking tires. We got full suspension. You know, it's sort of like cross country, maybe all mountain. I don't know if you'd want to go too hardcore, because these are going to start to rattle around a little bit. I've heard the plastic fenders rattling and the kickstand. So this is really an interesting piece to see. I love having a kickstand personally, especially for an electric bike. They're fairly heavy and you lean it against the wall, and if it tips, it could cause damage. Damage the derailleur, get unplugged, all kinds of possibilities. So having a kickstand, and this one is tool-free adjustable. There's a little button on the other side so you can raise it and lower it. It stays clear of this left crank arm. You're not going to have any collision as you're walking the bike back from a rack or maybe your garage. 170 millimeter crank arms here on this particular size, and it comes in 4 frame sizes, which is fantastic. You know, Cube is known for just having a bunch of different, you know, kind of skew levels and different colors and different sizes. I believe this is the only color it comes in, but I like it. It's sort of this metallic green with black accents and a little bit of orange thrown in just for fun. We don't have reflective sidewalls on the tires, and the frame, it's almost like camouflage coloring minus these little accents, but we do have integrated lights, and I love this headlight where it's positioned up high. It could shine down and illuminate the trail or help to keep you seen, though it doesn't have side cutouts like a lot of their street models do. So yeah, I really think this is sort of, I mean, you know, a rear light as well. Let me just power this on, and if we hold the plus button, it activates the lights, so you can see the beam there. Fairly focused and bright. This is aimable, so you can point it down, and by not having it here on the arch, which would be unsprung, but even on the crown, you're not going to get blocking from the fender, from the tire itself. I just think that's fantastic. Going to point where you steer. By the way, Acid, that's like their in-house brand, so anywhere you see Acid, whether it's like on racks or fenders, that's sort of like Cube's own brand. We got 4 LEDs right here. This one is fairly visible from multiple angles, and considering how small it is, I've always been impressed with how bright it goes. 25 kilograms on the rear rack. That's a great weight rating, especially considering, you know, some of the other frames they have, they're actually using this same gauge, like tubing from the frame, and building supports for their racks. This one's just sort of a bolt-on down here, but it looks to be kind of a custom interface. You can see it slotting really nicely. It's not protruding and creating snag points. Love that they've got a bungee loop, pannier hanger, platform for having a trunk bag. They even have a little spring, and I think they have some accessories that can click right onto this. You know, 25 kilograms is pretty good. That's fairly average for aftermarket racks, but some of the other Cube bikes have like a 18 kilogram rack that it's just not going to be able to carry as much. One of the trade-offs with this rack design is that your cargo wouldn't be suspended. This rack attaches to the rear swing arm, so it's going to bounce up and down just like the tire and the swing arm itself. There are some fancier racks that can attach to seat posts, or other full suspension bikes like from Reese and Mueller. They have the Delight with a suspended rear rack. Those tend to be a lot heavier, more expensive. I found the saddle to be pretty comfortable. Sequence, 30.9mm seat post, not super relevant since we do have front and rear suspension. But another trade-off is that this is not a dropper post. So mounting the bike and maybe standing if you get onto rough terrain and using your legs like shock absorbers, that's a rigid post. So it's if you're getting full leg extension, that saddle is going to be pretty high all the time unless you swap it out yourself. Interestingly, back here we got the RockShox Deluxe Select, and it only has rebound adjust. There's a little clicker right here, but there's no compression, there's no lockout. We just have air pressure right here, and you can sag it using this little rubber band thing. You kind of get on it and then inflate or deflate, and you kind of get it set up with the help of a shop. I do want to thank City Cycles. I'm here in North Vancouver, British Columbia. Beautiful place to ride mountain bikes, and they're just loaning me this as a free review, and I'm having fun checking out some of the new models. So getting back to some of the hardware on this bike, Shimano hydraulic disc brakes, 2-finger levers here with adjustable reach, not tool free though. And then down here we got a quad piston caliper up front with a 203mm rotor, extra large, and that's going to help to overcome the height and the weight of these plus size tires, 29ers. It's going to have more surface area for cooling and give you a better mechanical advantage. Back here, same thing, 203mm rotor in the back, quad piston calipers again. That's amazing. And again, boost hub spacing, 148mm with a 12mm through axle. I love that they're using the magnet and sensor that's right there on the hub instead of having a spoke mounted magnet that can get bumped out of position. Usually with the older Bosch stuff, you'd see like a little reader sensor right here. So to have it all tucked in close right there, it's not going to get bumped out of position or dirty. And then back to this motor, Bosch Performance Line CX. This thing gives you 85 Newton meters of torque. It measures the rear wheel speed, pedal cadence, and pedal torque over 1,000 times per second. It has shift detection, not perfect, it's software driven, but with this 12-speed drivetrain, you're probably shifting through the gears, climbing, descending, all kinds of stuff if you're someone who's actually using this for trekking or bike packing. And having such a strong, powerful motor that's not going to tear your chain apart or bend the teeth on your cassette is really wonderful. This thing also supports up to 120, actually above 120 RPM. So if you go to that really low gear and you start spinning quickly to overcome a hill, the motor's not going to drop out. Used to be a situation where you'd shift down to get an easier pedal support, and then the motor would struggle and you'd have to shift down again until you're just going really slow. So Bosch has overcome that. Magnesium housing, this is smart system technology, their latest generation of bikes with the nicest app, and also same 4-amp charger, really nice batteries and stuff. We'll get to that in a minute. Shimano Deore 12-speed with the clutch here, so we can tighten that, and then the derailleur just isn't going to bounce around as much. Your chain's going to stay tighter. This is a 38-tooth chain ring up front with a plastic kind of bash guard, and this is where it feels a little cheap to me. Plastic instead of aluminum alloy, and no narrow wide tooth. I mean, I'm surprised some of their other bikes that aren't mountain bikes have narrow wide. So for this not to have it, there's no guide. I mean, I was just really surprised. We do have a really long double-sided slap guard, which is nice, and then 10 to 51 tooth cassette. I mean, it's enormous. So great derailleur, great cassette. Room for improvement on the chain ring. Decent pedals, plastic with the fixed nubs. You can always replace these with like some magnesium Welgo, maybe aluminum alloy BMX pedals if you wanted. There's a lot of choices. 59 pounds on this, so roughly 60 pounds, and it probably varies depending on the size that you get. So again, the suspension, no compression or lockout on the rear, and then just the chain ring thing, and the kickstand it's just an interesting trade-off because I want to have it, but it does bounce around when you ride. I don't know. This has been a fascinating bike for me to look at and consider. Semi-ergonomic grips, really like those. The way they look and the way they feel is pretty nice. Pretty short stem, so it's a little bit more upright. Wide handlebar like you'd expect on mountain bikes. All the cables and everything are internally routed right through that A-Cross headset, and we do have that oversteer protection, so you can't go beyond that. If you were to fall or if the bike tips, it's not going to rip all the cables out of place. It's a nice protectant. It also keeps the crown of the suspension fork from impacting the frame, but in this case there's plenty of clearance, so I don't think that would be an issue. Down here to the battery, we've just got this rubberized shield. Press a little button right here and it kind of pops out, comes off no problem, but it doesn't lock to the frame, so try not to lose this. And if you're parking at a bike rack and someone was fooling around with it, they could just take it, which would be a bummer. Then we got the ABIS key-to-like keys, so you can match this to a frame lock or cafe lock, all kinds of stuff. And we do have bottle mounts right here for a bottle cage or a folding lock, and plenty of cargo capacity back there. So really glad they used this instead of a cheaper key from ABIS or otherwise. You insert it, twist it a little bit, and it comes down to that first position, and you press the button and it goes the rest of the way. Now this is where it gets a little precarious. The battery's fairly heavy and we got the fender, but there's good clearance on this particular model. 625 watt hours. You can charge this on or off the bike, but I recommend a cool, dry location based on what I've learned. You don't want this to go all the way to zero, and you just want to take good care of it in general. So it's fairly accessible, but now getting it back on, oh my gosh, this is a challenge. You got to line it up at the bottom, especially with one hand. And once you're trying to get it the rest of the way in, you need to make sure that the key is twisted so it sort of opens the locking point. Really hard to do with one hand, but once it's there, you can get it the rest of the way in and lock it. So it's kind of a two-hand thing is what I'm saying. And I just find myself having to fumble around with the keys a little bit more on this. And when you're trying to come from the bottom, I'm so grateful that there's a kickstand. Got that back on. I think because it's just black, fairly generic, it'd be a little easier to replace than some of the color matched covers at least. And then on this side, let's say you want to leave the battery on the bike and charge it. Well, this is the charging port right here. So it's fairly low. Yeah, we've got a fender, so maybe it keeps some of the water and dust and mud, but you're still on the side of the bike where it's tipping towards you. You can hit your head on the handlebar. You have to bend way down here to plug it in. I'm a fan of having this up here. Much easier to reach. And then you also don't have contact with the crank arm. So if that was plugged in and these cycled backwards, you could kind of bump it out of place or crack the plastic. I think that's a pretty good look at the bike itself. In terms of operation, once you've charged it with their 4-amp charger, just press the power button up here on the LED remote and you start changing assist levels. Green is eco, blue is tour, purple is sport, and red is turbo. There are optional LCD displays here. There's the Intuvia 100, the Kiox 300. There's a whole range of options, and that's nice, but then it's a little less stealthy. You might want to have your phone up here or GPS or other things. And this is where, there's another trade-off. You've got a high-capacity 625 watt-hour battery. There's a USB-C port on the bottom of the LED remote, but it's just got a wrench, and it's not for charging your phone. It's only for diagnostics. I mean, it's right there. I would love to just plug in my gear, but you can't. So maybe being a battery backpack for your phone, or pay extra for Bosch's like phone mount, and then you could use your mobile phone and charge it, and it would become a big display. Yeah, so it's a mixed bag. You don't have feedback about your speed or range or anything here. It's really just your battery percentage. Normally you'd have 5 blue dots here and that would be full, but we're down at like the last 10%. When it goes from blue to white, that means 10% is gone, and then it completely disappears, and blue means okay, you're down to 80%, and then 70, and so on and so forth. Left and right don't do anything, select doesn't do anything. It's really just plus and minus when you're using the LED remote. The smartphone app itself is very cool. It's called the eBike Flow app from Bosch, and it lets you adjust the highest level of assist and the lowest level of assist, and you can even dial in top speed, which is cool. But you can determine how much power you get and how quickly that power ramps up. Lots of cool features. There's even an automatic mode and an EMTB mode that relies a little bit more on pedal torque, and then you don't have to mess around with these settings. You can just focus on shifting between those 12 gears. And while we're up here, Shimano Deore trigger shifters, 2-way on the high lever, so you can use your pointer finger or your thumb. I almost always use my thumb because I like to have my pointer and middle finger up here for braking. So this is a nicer part. I definitely appreciate that. And overall, I mean, the cockpit is super clean and there's lots of options. Back to the Bosch app, there's like a geo-fence feature where the bike is sort of electronically locked until you get close to it with your phone. And someone could still ride it away mechanically, but they can't turn it on. The bike is kind of bricked. And then there's some other apps that give you like GPS kind of directions, and you can say, oh, I want the most efficient path, or I want the mountain path, or I want the most scenic path. And it's actually so cool. But once you get that, you just kind of toss the phone in your backpack if you don't have a mount. If you got the Kiox 300, it would give you some directions on screen. So there's a whole ecosystem of considerations. Again, this is just a free review. Hope this helps you guys. I love you, ride safe, and we'll see you next time. Very stable. Hear the fenders a little bit. Also, the kickstand could rattle around. Too bad. You also hear the motor since it's Performance Line CX. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and consider sharing it with a friend. And check out my website, ElectricBikeReview.com. There's an awesome category and filter tool set that will help you navigate thousands of electric bikes to find the right one for your lifestyle and budget. You can post comments, connect in the forums, and discover local shops so you can go in for a test ride and get your bike set up just the way you want it. I've been running EBR since 2012, providing the best data and limiting the ads. Have fun out there, ride safe, and we'll see you next time.